we've been through the property heat map, so we know what we're doing there. I guess should we continue with our ideas here with the spreadsheet, but try to get through it so we get on to our income requirement discussion, our home site value thing and keep this thing on track. Is everybody good with that?
Yeah.
All right, so we were talking about how we arrive at this valuation deal. And where did we leave off, or where do we want to go from here?
I think what we left off was asking the department to come up with some proposals for our consideration at the next meeting. Does that push us too late?
No, we might be able to pull a Zoom one or something like that.
Yeah, just
Pretty quick.
focusing on that.
Is everybody okay with that?
Because I think we hit the 640 acre level. And it's just a matter of figuring out the variables, what those factors will be, the value and the multiple.
So the
multiplier.
department will get a spreadsheet or some proposed ideas sent out to everybody, and we'll maybe try to throw together a quick Zoom. Or a semi-quick Zoom.
What are you thinking?
Depends on when the whiz kids can get this turned around, and that is not my department.
I think maybe what the committee can do, and then we can, as we've talked about, back into that number is just what factor in relation to what they would pay versus qualify versus this other classification is that spot you wanna try to hit to properly incentivize it.
Well,
Is it 10 times?
I think there has to be a rational basis for whatever we use, and I agree with Bob that it isn't the highest value irrigation, because that's such a small percentage. What were you talking about, the 5 different classes? Bob, you repeat.
So we have the average productivity price per acre for all of the different types.
Continuously cropped is $644 an acre. Means we can plug in these.
What is that again, Robin? That's the average.
Crop, that's the average.
And that's the
value per
average
acre.
productivity, so the statewide average productivity for that type,
So did that not change?
and it's converted to price per acre.
For crop,
Okay.
Yeah, it's continuously cropped, so.
That's
continuously.
pretty much Flathead Valley land.
Okay.
Right.
That's not Eastern
What
Montana.
are the other,
Crop.
what are the other,
So.
no, what are some other continuously cropped crops?
Continuously cropped is in this northwestern part of the
Yeah.
state, only in 7 counties.
Right.
Okay,
More common is
so then we have
Summer
summer fallow, which is
dry
at
land. Dry crop.
23, does that sound right? 2361? Okay,
Yeah, but that's half of the rate, right? Cause you're only farming it every other year.
Yeah.
right.
36.
Grazing is the 5508, irrigated, average productivity of irrigated is 1234.
Like 1,234.
Yes. Yep. Wild hay is 313. And specialty crop is 1,396
Wild hay at 313.
for wild hay in there.
Yeah,
After the 4 times multiplier, yeah.
7 times will be
what if you do 7?
3,700.
Then you could write it so that this is dynamic. Productivity, soil type isn't usually gonna change, but you could label it as the average productivity for wild hay in the state of Montana, and then we could analyze that on an annual basis or.
How many acres or what percentage is dominated by those different those 5 classes?
I don't know.
We
it's
do
overwhelmingly
have that.
dominated by grazing.
Let me pull it back up, yeah.
They might not be able to.
So continuously cropped has approximately 15,000 acres. Grazing is 34 million acres. Irrigated is 1.7 million acres. Non-irrigated hayland is 1.1 million acres. Specialty crop is 2,500 acres. And summer fallow is 12 million acres.
So when you say specialty crop, can you define that?
Specialty crop is anything that's the gardens, the apiaries, poultry,
Yeah.
fruit orchards,
What was your?
Sod
What
farms.
was your last classification?
summer fallow.
Okay, so that's dry, is that dry cropland? And how many acres is that?
12 million.
And what's that value?
Oh.
2369 an acre.
Divided by, well,
Well,
divided by, not
is it really twice of that though? Because when you do the productive value, you only do it every other year.
And that's factored in. So when I did it, I only used our share is normally 25%, but I only use 12.5% given it's only every other year crop.
So
So
that,
it's factored into the.
so that would be per year. It's,
Scott had suggested to me earlier on, they said, what if you did a weighted average of all of them? It would still be pretty low, I mean, because
of the
you're
grazing.
basically driven
Because
by
you're so dominated
summer,
by-
fall, and
And grazing was 30 million?
Grazing.
I mean, that's gonna drive it. It's not gonna be over 100.
grazing land has an average value higher than cropland.
The average productivity in grazing statewide is 0.21. That's the productivity,
0.21 what?
AUM, so animal unit per month.
I only work in bushels.
That's specialty crop in summer fallow. I think we didn't say crop.
So a weighted average, the grazing could drive it
Right. Pretty low.
artificially low,
Yeah.
right?
With 30 million acres?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if I took the average productivity of grazing, which is 0.21, and I took it against our total acres for 2023, against the total value that we have, I mean, you're still only looking at $55.
And that's the average dry land crop.
That's grazing.
Grazing is 55.
But that's if I'm using it against like the total current, like the total value.
So I guess the question is, what could we assign to the idle land that would make sense and not be too controversial, really? Can we think irrigated is too controversial, because that's not at all what they're using it for. Maybe if they had a little water, they would actually grow a crop in it. But wild hay seems reasonable, grazing, of course, the average is, at average productivity, it's $55. We haven't calculated out what the highest productivity is.
So if we used grazing, we could play with the factor.
Correct.
I mean, we
Yes.
could do 10 times grazing would be $5,500
That seems
Or,
like the easy way to do it and the most logical, right?
because of the $30 million. At 30 million acres. it's-
or we can still consider the notion of, because right now, anything, and if we're sticking with the 640 acre threshold instead of the 160, all of that acreage is currently classified as agricultural ground. We know what that classification is. We can take a snapshot in time of that, and we could value it at its productivity tomorrow, what we have it as today, and then just apply the factor to it. The only concern that I have with that is if Brendan buys a ranch and he's not doing anything with it, but the LG was farming it, and now it's gonna stay farming forever. At what point in time does Brendan have a beef that he's not doing anything with his and he shouldn't be paying farming values, because that's not what the use of his land is, but that is what we did for
But it
conservation.
That's what the potential-
incentivizes him to lease it out to the neighbor and graze it, and then he solved his problem.
But let me run this by you, and this is just a thought. I think the LG's onto something here. most places that are gonna be bought for recreational purposes are most likely grazing.
Mhm.
Right? And if they did buy, in my experience anyway, and been around a while, if these people are buying actual farmland for their recreation, so they can hunt birds or do whatever, a lot of that stuff is still being farmed. It might be leased out or whatever.
Right, right.
Because the farmland is actually what keeps the pheasants around or keeps the whitetails around or keeps the spurge down or what have you. So chances are good, and Ross, you've got more experience in this than I do. Most of these places that are being purchased are largely rangeland, right? They're gonna sit idle. And so can we say our rational basis? We picked grazing land because really most of the stuff that's going idle is most likely grazing land. And then we picked a factor to
Incentivize.
to incentivize, but our rational basis is. I haven't seen, I don't know, statewide, a lot of farmland actually taken out of production for a toy, right? I've seen
Just-
farmland go to CRP.
Yeah, small acreages maybe is all.
Yeah, but
They get
you know, even
divided
these
up.
guys that are buying them for recreation, for bird hunting or whatever, somebody's farming it. So really, it's rangeland that we're talking about, probably to the greatest percentage, but is that a fair assumption?
And it's defensible in the future regardless of the politics of leadership in the state.
Yes,
Because you picked up, not necessarily at a point in time, but a factor that's been used throughout the ages to value this property, and you're depending on that, and that may be tweaked, but it's still always gonna be the same formula.
so then all we need to do is mess around with column C, go ahead.
So Bryce just put 20 at, that's your factor, 20 times,
Yep,
and you changed the 160 to 640.
correct.
So the taxes on that, at 500 mils would be, yeah,
That's not unreasonable.
per section.
Yeah, for a section of land taken out of production.
I paid $2,500 for 2.89 acres.
Better grow a crop.
Better go buy myself a section.
Yeah, get that garlic in.
And I don't have any water except for the mud puddles. Yeah.
Garlic's easy to water.
Yeah.
So does everybody agree with me on the premise that maybe going with grazing, because most of the stuff is range? It's being.
Yeah.
And then,
And if it lies idle, it's gonna revert to grazing. It's not gonna be in crops.
right, right, and so we've got a rational basis for why we chose it.
Right.
Now, whether or not somebody wants to argue about our number 20 there as rational is somebody else's fight.
Well, that's the incentivization factor,
Right.
that we want to incentivize them putting it back
Right,
in the activate production.
So
so,
and I think it goes back, I mean, as far as a rational argument about it, is if it really is just your home site, it might be 700 acres or 1,000 acres or whatever it is, but it's really just your home site. There's a reason why you're charging a lot more for people than what, you know, than what you're gonna charge for ag production. And that's the point, is to say you should be paying a higher share, because the person that's got a couple of acres paying, you know, you know, I don't know, half of what we're, a third of what we're asking to pay on section. Seems like that's a little bit unfair if you're both just using it as a home site.
right,
Especially when you look at it from a local government perspective, that person with a large acreage is really a greater demand on the services that you provide as a county, because there is less land that's being frequented by them doing what they do. So that's more land that they're depending on you to protect. Wildland, fire.
Right,
Easy,
that gets to the
you know.
point of idle land that's not
It's more
actually
expensive. for you.
managed
Yeah,
is,
it's more expensive.
it's
for you.
more of a problem, yeah.
so are we,
I'm willing to use that for a proposal.
Happy friends,
I'm good. So that's it?
happy friends.
Yours okay. Everybody good with that? Speak your mind. I'm.
Chuck Marcus, you guys have been pretty quiet. What's going through your mind?
That makes sense to me.
How about anybody online?
Yeah, can they see your screen now?
Yeah, they should be able to see it.
That's like $12 an acre.
And this would be the market value equivalent, if it was valued at market value, it'd be 1,920,000. Again, I think there is gonna be a little, I guess, more incentive in probably eastern Montana than western Montana, just because of that.
What about that land that's
Western
just
Montana is mostly gonna have
not-
under 6 stories.
Yeah.
in eastern Montana, that land that you're not able to raise a crop or run your cattle on? Most of that stuff is BLM owns, right?
I wish I could tell you I didn't have any midnight flats that I pay taxes on, but yeah, most of it's, a lot of it is, right?
Yeah,
Get
the
through some of that.
unproductive, the really unproductive stuff. So I just wanna make sure that we're not, that we're not gonna impact any ranchers that are eastern Montana that have property. That if they pray just their own amount, they may get enough water to raise some grass on that they could graze. But for the most part, it's land they do not use.
I don't know, even in eastern Montana, 640 acres.
It's still a lot.
You ought to be able to meet the minimum income level, even if we double or triple it.
Or more.
On 640 acres, yeah.
Okay,
But we wanna make sure that we're not disincentivizing a lease to, and John had a good example of some people that are getting older and they're leasing their place to a neighbor kid, basically
Right,
at a nice rate
No,
to take care of the kid.
a lease should count.
Yeah,
If cattle are grazing, it doesn't matter who owns them.
right.
We're grazing cattle.
so they'll have their ag rate.
So we just wanna make sure that we're not choosing a dollar figure per acre so high that it's driving the lease rate up or preventing someone from leasing it for a affordable
Right,
price, right?
so,
John, am
yeah,
I saying that?
Yeah, no, you're good. That, my example, it actually came to $6 an acre, what these people were making off their lease. Which. It would seem like a reasonable lease to me. It was a $40 deal and they weren't overstocking the place and that's what they grossed.
Start
So-
recovery, oh,
So $6 is what they were making, and now we're gonna charge them $12 an acre.
This is
in
not
taxes.
Yeah, that's, they'd have to meet the $6
Gotcha.
to become it, yeah.
Gotcha.
So are we pretty good on the $5-6 an acre income requirement? Marcus said,
Yes, I-
anything, it's his turn.
no, I'm not opposing that, just a quick question, like procedurally here, so. How do you handle if somebody wants to rest, let's say you got, a section, you want to rest half your section for 2 years. And you're not making any money off of it, how are you gonna handle that?
once you qualify,
I know it's probably kind of like a far out there, but I can see that being a situation.
once you qualify unless we're adding a renewal. So you make sure when you apply for it, it's a year you're not resting it. And you've got the income.
Did we drop the renewal component? Cause I know at one point
Not yet.
we talked about that.
Cause I thought the discussion was an affirmation
Of some sort,
of some sort,
in a certain period of time,
right?
maybe not every single.
So
year,
you're gonna
but-
have to time your resting of it.
Yeah, that's the only thing that's been going through my mind during this discussion is how do we not have somebody getting caught up in this loophole of like, well, I rested it for a year and then I did a strategic burn, and so now for 2 years I've been not making any money off of this.
Or if
but-
someone's just sick. I
Yeah,
mean,
or sick,
you're
yeah.
right, we gotta build those in
So,
to whatever.
not
we do.
opposed to anything we're talking about, I just, that when you said I was being quiet, that's what I was trying to wrestle with, so. If we're gonna get there, great, just want to make sure we're talking about that.
I mean, I guess the only thing I would say, kind of push back on that a little bit, is if a guy only owns 2 sections and he rests all of them for 2 years, it doesn't seem like he's in production. Right? You're not actually, that's not good management, that's not, I mean, I don't know. It seems like most people are gonna have 5 sections or 10 sections. And you might rest some of it in a rotation process, but this is averaged over your whole place. And so if you really have 1 section and you say, well, I'm gonna rest it for a couple of years. That's not a likely scenario for somebody that's in production ag.
Well, we do need an act of God kind of thing, when all of Garfield County burned down here a few years ago. There was a lot of country that saw more than 2 years worth of rest, because it had to happen. And you don't wanna say Taylor Brown's ranch isn't the real ranch, right? Because you had to rest how many thousands of acres out of that burn, right? So we gotta
I don't know, the next year looked pretty green.
Yeah, but you don't wanna
Well,
get
that's
there right
how
now.
it goes.
Yeah.
So there's gotta be some kind of, we've gotta build
We've got to build this.
a fail-safe, right, or an out, an extenuating circumstances kind of thing in there.
Yeah, whatever the mechanism is, as long as that producer can go to you all and say, hey, I'm not gonna hay for whatever period of time, don't raise my taxes up on me, I'm in production ag, I've got a reason for this. And maybe it's as simple as a discussion like that, I don't know, but just wanna make sure we're not punishing people for making independent strategic decisions on their property for what's best for the land.
So statutorily, why you need some kind of language,
Yeah.
but probably assign rulemaking to the department to figure that out.
Yeah, but you know my deal on Department of Revenue writing the rules. I want as few rules and as little discretion as possible.
But I don't think this is something you wanna try to put in the statute about what,
Yeah.
what's an escape and what's not.
Yeah.
Well, something like exigent circumstances as determined by rule.
Right,
You may
right.
end up having to do that.
If it's regarding, like, if your 640 burns and it was in production the year before, it falls back to the natural disaster, it's protected by that,
Okay.
okay? But then if it's like, let's say, summer fallow, we're looking at historical use and it's protected by that. So just because you pull it out to rest for a year or two doesn't necessarily, we're gonna come yank you out of ag without talking to the producer first to see why it's resting, or if there was a natural disaster, so.
There's some extenuating.
And those things are already in statute,
Great.
so. Perfect.
Bob? Yeah,
Well, I
so I can see it.
was asking Robin, if we go to 640, do you need to change the RTC law anyway?
Yes, I think we would, wouldn't we?
You would have to, and I think rather than saying egg is exempt, the worry about saying just putting an acre size on it, that if you're over 640, you don't have to report your sale price, you know, that. I think there has to be an egg component in there because we've got industrial and or commercial properties that may be that size, but
Oh,
we
yeah.
still want them to report their sale price on there.
I think
So we would have
just-
to adjust it somehow.
I think we just add the 640 to the end of it. To say. Agricultural property, 640 acres.
Or greater.
Or greater and are excluded from providing sales price.
Yeah. Yep.
But then. So if I buy a section from my neighbor, that wouldn't be exempt.
Right.
So are we all good on this piece?
640 and then 20 times multiplier.
Crazy.
Ag grazing, ag
Everybody-
grazing.
Put
Everybody's
that,
good,
put that in pencil so it can be.
but at least we're good here with this bunch.
Anybody online?
Brian,
Brian's
you're
talking.
muted.
Sorry, that sounds good to me. Now that, since I'm talking, I was gonna ask, like, maybe Amanda or Robin, a question too. I mean, so if you have crop failure, that's written into it too. I mean, you can have crop failure for like 2 years in a row and still keep your ag status, or
One,
just one?
yes.
Be- Okay, and because as you are aware, the cherry growers are taking a rest this year, mandatory rest.
Yeah, and I feel it's really only gonna affect anyone who's currently in provisional.
Yeah. Yeah, because we got totally froze out in January, so.
Okay. Next step, we've looked at, done the heat map thing, and Jared's working on maybe finding a way to send that out that doesn't crash everybody's system. So let's go on to home values.
I think we still need to settle this prior bill,
Okay,
minimum income and a scaling factor. What does that look like? So that, I mean, otherwise this 640 thing, if it's just a $1,500, it's moot point because everyone's gonna be able to
right.
effectively.
So that income requirement discussion is on here. Is that where we should be now?
Well, it's in the same draft. So
Okay.
it probably makes sense just to stay in this,
It's in the non-qual draft.
it's in this same draft we've been kind of talking
Definition
about.
of ag.
Yeah, that's basically need to decide if that minimum value should be adjusted, and then if we're truly trying to capture, make sure these 20,000, 10,000, whatever size places are devoted to ag, what's the scaling factor income wise to show that, yes, that entire property essentially is in ag use.
And do we need to do it on the various crops? Amanda's giving me the hell no.
No, I don't think so, just.
From an administration perspective, that would be very difficult.
Yeah.
Well, if you're grazing land, $5 an acre might be good. If you're cherries, that's not so good.
Well, I thought we were gonna do it on a size thing. That's what
Scale.
John or Bob said, I think it was.
Well,
John.
and AUMs are based on that minimum. So
Right.
if you're assigning one to grazing, then the AUMs would be
All right.
going back to that one, and everything else would be something else.
So all we need to do is pick a dollar figure.
What from inflation, I don't know when the 1,500 was adopted, but just taking into account inflation, what would it be today? Sure,
I
someone.
think it's like 4,000.
That was 4,000.
4,200,
Yeah, that's been around since the eighties, that
Yeah.
$1,500.
so it'd be 4,000 plus.
In our last meeting, we talked about having higher income requirements for lower size properties, lower acreages.
Right.
And then the amount per acre goes down progressively. Once you get to 640, then it's at basically the same rate, a relatively.
Okay, so
Lower
you're,
does not-
you're talking dollars per acre instead of just,
Yes,
Yeah,
okay?
and the reason we did that, LG, because I don't think you were here. we
Yeah,
talked
but that's
about
fine,
some of
I
these-
understand.
Some of these big places, and then there's a couple of big players in the deal that could lease a little bit of their place out to meet that.
$1,500.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
and, have at least a corner of the place and then keep
I
the
get
rest
it,
of it for fun. And so we were trying to find a way to say, all right, it's got to prorate or amortize across the acreage.
so what dollar amount was proposed, or has there been one proposed?
I haven't written in my notes.
I kind of thought somebody was gonna
Do some.
put
do
up,
some-
put up a scale or a ladder thing, we could kind of propose
We can
one.
take a look at it,
I don't remember.
but I thought it was like, close to like $5,000 an acre for under 5 acres and, or what was it?
He
I mean,
was doing something.
It's like
Brian,
a stair step of, if you're in this many acres, it's this per acre, and then incrementally,
yeah,
so it's
He didn't send any
so
of
many
that to
dollars
us,
on
did
your
he?
first 10
No.
acres, so many on your next 10.
and we asked Brian how much a cherry orchard on the Flathead could reasonably make.
Right.
And he had a number for us, but I didn't record that anymore.
And Tony's, is he out there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't around.
But we're not doing it by crop,
No,
because cherries are a pretty high dollar crop,
Oh, yeah,
right, compared to garlic maybe, or
well, garlic is a high dollar crop.
is it?
Yeah.
And again, if we move forward with the next one, the 1 acre thing, that kind of takes care of a lot of the issues with the smaller
Okay,
acreage.
okay, thank you
tracts.
for reminding us of that,
So-
because we all, I get
I mean, yeah.
caught there a lot.
If it
I wanna
helps,
keep that in the back of our minds too, is that will solve a lot of the issues with these smaller parcels.
Well, Brian probably has a dollar amount for, at
Yeah.
least for cherries,
He
Brian,
did, and I think somebody brought,
it's about $10,000 for 100 trees
is it?
And that's 1 acre parcel. So,
or less.
or less, yeah.
So if I do the math, let's say 4,000, like as the income, and you divide that, you throw your 640 acres into 4,000, that's only, that's $6.25 an acre.
okay.
Right, that's what we're talking about for
But-
larger parcels.
There's a lot of 10 to 20 acre either grazing or, well,
Yeah.
hay,
Grazing's by AUM,
I
yeah.
know, which you wouldn't qualify 10 acres, I know that.
Yeah.
It's 120.
With average productivity,
Yeah.
yeah.
I thought
At
we
the
said,
$1,500.
But cherries is a really high value crop
right,
compared to other legitimate uses for smaller parcels. Everything from,
But cherries isn't the only specialty crop.
I know,
Oh,
I don't think we should place our value on the highest specialty crop. I think it needs to be something that would allow, haying on smaller parcels, and
Or even grazing, really.
I kind of agree with you.
So
Well,
if that's the case, we should just choose a dollar amount per acre and then set it. minimum and not do the latter scenario. You know,
Cause you don't ladder grazing.
yeah, I mean, what it'll do is it'll make it simple for some of these things like orchards to meet that requirement, but
But we'll fix that with the 1 acre homestead.
it'll fix the first acre of it.
So if we,
So this, but we're looking to, you gotta hit this number to qualify for ag, and we were just saying like grazing on 640 that we talked about was $6 an acre. Right, so if you got 5 acres, and it's $6 an acre, it's $30. That's what you gotta show. And then.
Well,
you
some of
get ag.
that land really isn't good for anything but grazing.
Right, but.
But what about
I
the?
think
We're talking
Or-
about minimum and then.
Yeah, a minimum.
Once
Yeah.
you- Okay, so there's,
There's
yeah,
have to be a
there's
floor.
gotta be a minimum,
Yeah, that's
otherwise everybody's gonna hit it and then everything's gonna be an
Yeah.
ag, which is.
So should the minimum be like an inflation escalated like 4,000,
Right.
which is easy to explain to the legislature?
Yeah,
Right.
4 or 5,000. Go for around there.
5,000, because it's not gonna be adjusted for a long
Well,
time.
I'm
That's right.
not arguing about it,
Yeah.
and say
Okay,
the price of commodities hasn't followed the inflation rate generally of
I think that's,
CPI. So
yeah,
Right.
I think that's a very good point. It would be interesting to know, and I'm sure it's almost impossible to find it, but what was the, what was an average bushel of wheat
What year?
in the year that this $1,500 was established,
Like
right?
265.
but wheat isn't grown
Yeah.
on these small.
So,
parcels.
we're getting 265 or whatever.
It's
and,
probably double that now,
But
but
hay definitely could be.
Hay or,
Yeah, I mean, I
Grazing.
don't know what kind of commodity you use, whatever, but.
yeah,
Well, but
You'd have to use
everything
commodity.
that's tied to grazing, you've already said that
Right.
yeah.
AUM's based on the calculation MSU does, which is driven by the price of cattle. And also, right now, that shouldn't take many AUMs to make $1,500, some years it might.
yeah, it's coming that it's gonna take more AUMs to make $1,500.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
Mr. Campbell has a question online.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna reinforce that I think we do need a certain minimum. Because I mean, I think you could qualify by saying if you're trying to figure out what a bona fide farmer is, like we were talking about in a definition. I don't think you could call a bona fide farmer someone that has a gross income of $30, so. I think you could qualify it that way by saying to really be into farming, the profession of farming, if you can't gross whatever $4,500, then you might want to take up a different profession.
well, I don't think we're limiting or incentivizing agriculture to full-time farmers. And I'm an example. I own 10 acres that I lease out for hay production.
Yeah,
But that's not what I rely on as my sole source of income. But
But
if
it's
I'm keeping, I could subdivide that, but I am keeping that in active agricultural production. And so
right. I agree. I agree with you, Lieutenant Governor. And there wouldn't be a cherry business, and there probably wouldn't be a lot of farming if farmers didn't have a secondary income. I agree with that. But I'm just saying to be a legitimate farmer, I think there should be some minimum there. Otherwise, I mean, right now, I just feel like a lot of these people here in my neighborhood are just like thumbing their nose at the Montana tax, the way it's set up now, because they're just taking such advantage of this loophole, and they're not really legitimate farmers. So if there's anything you can do, I mean, we can't set a minimum acreage. We've decided that. So I think there has to be some minimum to, how much you're actually producing. And to me, the dollar amount's like the only way you could reach that.
well, I would propose 5,000 as escalated for inflation, even though one could argue crops haven't kept up with it. Certain crops have, others haven't. I think we could defend that.
Let's, Mark had a question or something to say, and then let's get back to
Would,
that.
like in your example, would 10 acres qualify if the minimum was 5,000? Or would that basically keep your?
Depends on what hay's selling for. And it's
But if-
irrigated,
but if
and
you're-
so, yeah, I think I would still qualify. But it really depends on hay prices.
But if you're just leasing it and,
Oh, I'd crop share it.
okay, so if somebody was leasing it, let's just say they were just purely leasing it and got $1,500 a year, then they would,
They wouldn't qualify.
Qualify.
They need more
Even though
acres
it-
than 10.
even though it would be a true ag production, right?
Yeah, you're gonna exclude, by setting 5,000, you're gonna exclude some, but it makes it harder to gain with garlic farms and whatnot if you do set some in.
Well, yeah, maybe, so maybe 5,000 is too high to accommodate all the different types of agriculture. But so that it is that's a toughie. Cause yeah, I mean, I'm all for promoting, there's definitely some legitimate little 1 acre farms, I mean, that are producing, I don't know, $1,500, $2,000 worth of produce or fruit or something, and they're selling it locally, and I think we want to be able to promote that. That's a lot better than you know, having it shipped from China or Chile or something and buying it frozen. But it's a lot better to have it locally grown and locally sold. So I don't want to discourage that. So I don't know, maybe we don't want to raise it that much, if at all.
Well, I think we should raise it.
I think we need to raise it. I mean, the true impact for these smaller parcels that have these high value crops, whether it's cherries or garlic or whatever, they're still gonna qualify. The real impact is gonna be the grazing. Because now you're gonna raise that minimum AUM from 25 to 75, somewhere between 75 to 100 if you went to 5,000.
And that's gonna.
And then that
adversely
means you're
affect
gonna have to have at least 350
Acres?
some acres at the average. I mean, if you have above average productivity for your grazing land,
I agree with you.
be lower, but I mean, that's the real impact is, again, like Brian's situation, the better solution to solve that is the 1 acre. And then you have your people that are, they have their house there that they're trying to get advantage because of that 1 acre value versus like your 10 acres that's just vacant, that's truly being used. I mean, that's, again, trying to just, they're separate issues, but they are linked because the majority of what we're talking about in Brian's issue is solved by the 1 acre at market value if you have a residential property house on that property versus it's just 5 acres that you're doing whatever with that doesn't have a house on it, and you probably don't need the higher income.
And I think if we go back to the count where 34 million acres is in grazing, that's the type that we're gonna have to make sure that we're considering with this income requirement, because that's the majority of the agricultural land in Montana.
Well, question. We have grazing is split as far as where it doesn't go by income, it goes by the AUMs that are equal to. Couldn't it have two separate where we have an income requirement in the one portion where we actually bring it forward to what it would be from inflation? And then in the sub part that talks about the grazing, say that Montana State University determines the AUMs that are equal to the 1,500 or 2,000, and that is what's set as the requirement for the grazing land.
Is that too low though for those great big properties that want to say, I'm grazing land, but I own 560 acres? And they have one critter?
That comes down to use. From me, when I was looking at an ag application, they had to tell us that they were grazing and we asked what they were using. you know, what type of animals, that was a call for the officer to have looked at for use. It wasn't necessarily on the income portion of it.
Okay.
Because we just went back to what the reports were from the NRCS for the
So-
grazing.
So it really is a function of use and income. And that should capture those small specialty crop producers.
It should, it makes a mess out of the grazing field, doesn't it?
Well, she's suggesting leaving the AUMs to be calculated against the 1,500 and separating it from the income requirements from everything else.
Okay, but then, so what does that do?
So that still leaves about an average 120 acres that's required for the 25 animal units, and that adjusts every 2 years a little bit, as we see.
My biggest concern is now you've got two different income requirements for the same use property other than one's grazing, one's cropland. It's still to qualify for A, you've got two different.
Well, you have to pick one, right?
We've worked them up before where we did it as a prorated. We have worked through this example before as way to do it. So there is a set of information out there on how to set it up for us to calculate it.
Should we
And
try?
then
it?
what do you do? So with that in mind, what do you do with the guy that has 10 acres of hay and he's got 40 acres of cows? What income are you using to value his 50 acres?
Would be the weighted average in between the grazing limit and the $4,000, right?
You would use the 1,500 to see if he qualifies, like what his carrying capacity is, you'd use the calculations of 1,500, but the valuation would be the weighted average is what you're saying?
Cause that would be tricky when it comes
It
to
gets, it gets
qualification.
tricky, because the $1,500 is irrespective of size.
Yes,
Right.
So that could,
but we do have mixed uses even now where you take it and you calculate that back to the dollar amount for AUM and add that to the other. You get the 1,500, but we had done up one where you had two different numbers in there. You would prorate how many acres were in one and using that towards the whatever rate you had for the AUMs and the prorate same percentage towards the other to get to the other limit. And then put those, did they make those or not? It makes it more complicated, but it is doable. It's the same.
The only reason that there's even an AUM thing in the statute is so you can't take your 5 acres and rent it to your neighbor for $50 an animal unit month or $500 an animal, and he rents his to you, and it's to keep you from scamming the system. It's
Right,
not-
Right.
It's
Yep,
not
exactly.
anything other than that. It was
Right.
just a way to, where everything else, where you actually are producing something you have to sell, you can prove it. You know, I guess the lieutenant governor could sell me your hay for $500 a ton, and I could sell mine for 500 a ton, but we'd be subject to a audit on that.
I'm not a big fan of that AUM deal. It seems like it's confusing to me. I like just a minimum amount and dollar amount per acre.
after a certain, like 640, after 640.
The other thing with the AUM is it's
Wait,
not only a safeguard for you and me leasing, but it's a safeguard for me going and buying a pig or a cow and grazing it for one day out there and then selling it and saying, here, I just sold this cow for $2,000. Even though I only put it in my yard for a day, here's my income. I mean, that's really what the AUM conversion factor is to help prevent, is that it's not hard to sell, you know, a cow and meet that $1,500 and only use your land for a day to graze it. And then say, here's my income. That's the other thing, that AUM calculation is in there to prevent from happening.
I don't think we need a higher minimum. I think we need to change the $1,500.
I think so.
So we're somewhere, I got myself lost. I'm not sure on the actual here. So, state one of the elephants in the room, the APR. They've got X thousand acres, X 100,000 acres. Bunch of it's BLM, but let's just talk about the deed. They sell if they got $5,000 in income, they're cowboys.
No, after a certain amount, after a certain, like if we take 640 as our cutoff limit
Threshold.
for the $5,000 minimum, then it should be like, John suggested, like $6 an acre after that, regardless of size.
Gotcha, but so that solves that problem, and
Yeah.
that solves the problem with some,
But now the use though, that's still part of the equation.
Right,
You have to, if you're saying you're an ag production, then you need to demonstrate you're an ag production. They can't claim that I rent out space for yurts.
no,
And so I make X amount of dollars on this acreage, so now I've hit the minimum. They have to show that they produce something in ag
right.
that also, that hit that minimum, which right now they're leasing.
right,
You know, they've got cattle grazing on most of it and leasing at least portions of it, and those portions, I would assume, would then still qualify.
And that's where the AUM steps back in, so you can't, we can accept a lease currently in today's statute, we accept leases for anything over 20 acres, but you, if it's for grazing, you have to meet those AUM requirements first, that way your neighbor can't just write you a lease saying that he's leasing the ground from you. So you qualify under the income, you have to meet those AUMs first,
And actually put cows on.
and actually, yeah, and use, and have the use in play.
so administratively, are we gonna struggle with some of these big places like the APR, so they rent the 2 Crow out, okay, but we're not going back to Steve's place on the other side of it and wandering around making sure there's cows all over, right? How do we?
Well, everything, I mean, you'd only be doing this on the, well, and are we doing? Well, I guess you're doing it on everything because everything has to prove,
Yeah, you see where I'm going, and how do you mechanically and reasonably do that, right? I don't wanna go drive all over the pronghorn, but making sure there's cows all over. Used all across it, right? How do we? You know, Bonnie's already putting in the procurement request for a black helicopter, but I'm telling you. So what do we do, right? How do we effectively administer something like that if we're gonna talk about use all across a big property?
well, and because we brought that up, like, I mean, to me, it seemed like, well, every parcel should prove up.
Yeah, every parcel.
If you're doing X here, then you should show it, and it seemed like early on, it's like, yeah, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Right, so we're really taking this aggregate over whatever the size of property that's contiguous or within the same county, or so however we do that, right? Like you got 100,000 acres or 500,000 acres or 50, whatever it is, but you're gonna put it all together and you have to demonstrate AUMs and dollar amounts that you're using it, and if they're really making it all off of a third of this property, you know, I don't, you know, if they can prove it up on a third of the property under the formula we used, I guess they've done that. Because otherwise, you're gonna have to go and look at every acre and every cow, and that's, you're not gonna be able to do that.
Yeah, totally no on the helicopter. Good, we're on the same page. So,
Yeah.
so we're gonna amortize that or prorate that.
The
dollar
$5 or
per
$6 an acre
acre.
kind of.
Everybody's still good with that, because I thought that's kind of where we left it, but I wanted to make sure we were all still there.
And if we have $5,000 as our minimum, that works out to $7.81 an acre. Up to 640, you know, but then after 640, if your requirement is $6 an acre, I don't think that's unreasonable. I mean, I think that's doable even with the AUM requirements, isn't it?
So right now, it takes 117 acres to get 25 AUMs at $1,500. So it's gonna take almost your 460 acres to qualify for 640 acres or however many. Do the math. Let me do the math.
So do the math.
It's gonna take quite a few.
20 times 4 is 480.
Essentially, anybody that's under 160 acres qualified for ag via grazing will not be able to do that.
Correct.
And so then we run into a problem for this gentleman that's been on this screen a number of times.
Right,
And I
the 80
really-
acres and but he was able to prove, to substantiate the production value of his grazing land was higher than 0.21.
At 25 animal units.
Yes.
If we were to raise it to
That would be. a
5,000, then he would no longer qualify again.
Yeah.
But can it also be a function of the income and the use? Why can't it be it has to be one or the other?
Well, if he's grazing and
He is grazing, but he also has to supplement his grazing to raise the number of cattle on it that he's raising, right? Isn't that his issue? He's got 80 acres, but he didn't qual-
he didn't have enough AUMs.
From, based on the soil survey.
yeah.
So he went through to clippings, got it reanalyzed to
change
show
the
that
soil survey.
yeah, that the carrying capacity is higher than the soil survey. It indicated,
And that qualified him as that.
and that qualified him to meet the 25 AUMs.
And what I don't know, maybe you guys see it differently. I really don't want to do something that takes a person like that, and not just him, but people
Right.
like that,
Right.
and hurt them, because they aren't really the problem we're
No.
trying to address.
Yeah.
And I would feel awful terrible putting those people in a bad spot. I
Right.
just, I don't want to do that.
No.
That's-
What,
So how do we take care of that class of ag producer? Any ideas?
Could AUMs be set not against a value? Like, if the ag advisory board or ag committee approved it, could they just set a static AUM and not have it tied to a value? And that way it removes the value from it?
They could, but they would instill some sort of criteria to gauge that against, and I guess I don't know what we would change that criteria to.
Senator Beard, you have your hand up.
Yes, I do. One of the things that the lieutenant governor brought up earlier, and I think we shouldn't lose sight of it, especially with trying to simplify this as much as possible. But if we start just taking all sizes of parcels, ag land, and using a one size fits all revenue for each of those parcels, are we going to get into the thick waters of not treating one type of ag property owner differently than another? Say the 140 versus, or the 160 versus 460, because it might be perceived as giving more opportunity to the larger landowners to be able to hit that minimum threshold. So I just wanted to keep an eye toward that. Thanks.
Thanks, Senator. I don't know, yeah, we gotta figure out how to not,
So we want to fashion a threshold that would allow someone grazing cattle on 8 acres to qualify for agricultural production. Or even 20 acres.
yeah,
well,
like, and this gentleman, and I forgot his name, he was legit.
Yeah,
And I
cow.
don't want to put legitimate people in the gaming system who are actually hurting people.
And that's, well, you know, I guess I look at it and think if you've got 10 or 15 or 20 acres and you're trying to claim you're in ag production because you're grazing on it, you're gaming the system because nobody's actually surviving on 20 acres or, you know, I mean.
right, but like my example, I'm not trying to game the system, I'm really
Right.
keeping land
Right.
in agricultural production.
But you're not gonna raise a cow on 20 acres unless you've got,
No, I wouldn't, I don't qualify for grazing.
yeah, if you had a feedlot, you know.
And I think that's my-
then that might work.
I
But
guess that's,
commercial.
I guess that's where I'm coming from is I'm not sure that you can qualify. I mean, right, you just said it's like 117 acres before you actually
For
qualify
grazing.
for grazing. So are we trying to say you can qualify at 20 acres for grazing? I mean, you
That's the
can't
question,
now.
that's the question I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't think you can qualify at 20 acres for grazing. I don't know.
But should you
You
be able to
can't
qualify
today.
at 100? Because if you bump up the minimum to 4,000, nobody's gonna qualify at 100. Should somebody
Right.
qualify at?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're probably in a decent
Well,
spot as far
you're
as what you
making
can
an assumption
qualify.
you're not irrigating, and if you had 40 acres
True, but-
irrigated pasture, I'm pretty sure you could hit $5,000.
Yeah,
But most isn't irrigated. I mean, most grazing land is.
but I wish I could remember that gentleman's name. He had a,
Steve.
he had a legitimate thing going.
Yeah, yeah, we don't wanna.
We don't wanna hurt him, and and the people in that class of people. Cause that,
And
it's not hurting.
and part of his operation was, he was actually part of a bigger operation.
Right.
right? So they used it far more than just the grazing. I mean, it was a part of a larger operation. It just was different ownerships than it did now. And I don't know how you, I don't know.
Can we, doing this, I don't want to give the department discretion. Because I'm just called wreck. I was trying to find a way to think, all right, how do we leave rulemaking authority to take care of those specifics? But then I run right back into that thing I swore to you guys I wouldn't do, which makes. So I started talking before I thought my way through it.
I mean,
So I think it seems like in the scenario where we were saying the grazing is $6 an acre with a minimum of 5,000. That makes it really hard, not impossible for a small ag producer, even if they have 640 acres. And it makes it really easy for somebody who has 10,000 acres.
640, you can make $5,000 easy. You could.
But you
Well,
take
in the
you take a
10,000
10,000 acre ranch, you only have to make 60,000. And you qualify as ag.
Well, if you're, a lot of your places, it's pretty easy to say you qualify for agriculture, but you have to have a place where, and you can't penalize a larger landowner by saying you have to make more and more and more money.
Well, if you go with the $6 an acre, 640 acres, that's $3,840.
It's right
And
under
we'd be,
4,000.
if we're gonna make the 160 acre guy earn more than the 640 acre guy. That's not very fair.
Yeah, I guess that's my point is it's not a linear equation.
Okay.
You almost have to leave it at $1,500, leave well enough alone.
But then you have,
Scale up from there.
Scale up based on size, so maybe at 160, it goes from 1,500 to 2,500, and at 320, it goes to 4,000 or something of that notion. Because then at the 120 magical grazing number, you'd still be able to qualify those smaller acres that stayed at 1,500. And there are other states that do it that way.
right, Oregon has a minimum, and then, so, I don't know, let's say $1,500, and then if you're, say, 100 acres and above, you meet that 1,500 plus a per acre fee. So there's some sort of minimum lot size dollar amounts to try to keep out extrapolating a per acre value to very low acres. And then you have it in a, you'd have the per acre fee in addition to that minimum amount, I think is how you'd want to structure it.
I think to protect who you're trying to protect, the stay grid in the beginning would have to be $1,500. So
That's what my gut's telling me. I'm not, I couldn't do the math to prove it. That's what I think. Does anybody have a problem with that? LG, you might.
No, if you're trying to protect the small grazers, that makes sense. And I'm not opposed to protecting the small grazers. It won't help my 10 acres, but it'll help 80 acres.
Well, but your 10 acres is okay because you're selling.
I'm in hay.
And anybody,
Because I figured out I can't do it with grazing, so it's in hay.
right, and that's a legitimate crop production.
It is.
A person who's got, like Mr. Smith, who's got grazing land, not hay land. We don't want to discourage those guys and turn them into suburbs. So as long as we do that, should we build some kind of proposed scale on this thing for the gang, for the next meeting? See what you guys think.
we're
Yeah,
having the next meeting because we have to have this to Rick by the end of the month.
we're gonna have a quick Zoom to hit a few things, right?
so 1,500 is gonna remain the minimum up to what? Up to 1 acre.
Don't know.
I think they need to scale it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you guys okay if we get you a proposed?
Yeah.
You know, and again, all it is, it's not what Department of Revenue says, it's what we want to start with and have everybody pick it apart and add it and whatever. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
So, okay, so I have some questions. we know that we're gonna start at $1,500. Are we gonna tap out anywhere? Do you want it to be chunks of money like that? Do you want it to be dollars per acre at a certain size? We switch to dollars per acre, or you just want a dollar amount as you go?
I thought I heard it's $1 an acre with the minimum,
Okay,
so. A dollar an acre, but then there's a minimum threshold.
Like a single dollar?
The 1,500 or
That
whatever.
was my dollar.
A dollar amount.
Dollar figure.
A dollar, not, yeah.
Not a dollar.
I think that starts at,
Right.
I think that
$6
starts,
per acre, yeah.
let's probably start that at the 640.
Right, and that's.
And if you wanna make it $6, it's 640 and then start staggering it down from there, a certain dollar amount.
That sounds legit. And then it ties into everything else we're doing.
I think these guys can run the numbers on the AUM stuff and figure it out.
Right.
But I don't wanna ask that question right now.
Come on, Bob, what's the question?
Well, the MSU figures out how many AUMs qualify, right? Well, that's gotta be based on the price of cattle,
Right.
right? So like if you're raising right now, say you've got an AUM, which is a count of calf, so you got a calf to sell, and if that calf worth $2,000. It don't take 3/4 of an AUM to meet the 1,500, so either you get 25 AUM, you know, I mean, 25 AUM will run a count of calf for 4 years. huh? 2 years, 2 years.
I don't know if it was a minutes formula deal. Do
The
we?
Olympic average of the cattle prices, we have a copy of, there is a copy of his
Well,
report actually out
Let's
on the
not
ag
go there.
website.
Sorry, I
We got
Bob
other-
into asking the
We
question.
got other things to do.
Sorry, Bob.
That's all right.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Campbell had a question earlier.
Oh, I was just gonna comment, so I at first I thought it was really important to, to have that the minimum. I think you have to have some kind of minimum, and I always thought it should be raised, but it just really does get to be a tough situation, and I just feel like instead of belaboring it so much, I think there's other ways to clean up the whole tax code besides that, but because I don't want to discourage real small legitimate farms either. But I don't know, could you still have the two different minimal amounts for grazing and then grazing agriculture and then non-grazing agriculture? What did we decide on that? Because the AUM model seems to me to make perfect sense for, when it comes to grazing. Obviously, you can't use that in every type of agriculture, but.
So have, as for grazing, a separate requirement, you gotta meet this certain AUM per acre, and then everything else has a dollar amount with a threshold, a minimum.
That's what I was wondering, if that's feasible.
How long does that need to administer is my question to DOR.
I think it is too, it's the mixed use ones that don't quite meet either one that will have to come up with a way to add it all together to see if they would qualify, because if you've got hay and grazing and you don't make $5,000 in your hay, as an example, and so then we have to deduct what you do make in your hay against your animal unit requirement, there would be some tricky business that TBR could help us figure out.
It can be done.
Yeah, I think it can be.
Well, and if you set a minimum dollar amount for non-grazing and a minimum AUM for grazing, you're inherently saying one AUM is worth so many dollars. And then you would use that ratio to sort of get you where you need to be in mixed use cases. Right?
So is the $1,500 just a minimum amount regardless of size?
Right now.
Right now,
Right now, it's.
Then going
Yeah.
forward in our new, because if you're gonna graduate up the requirement for income, are you going to define what sizes qualify for the $1,500 rate versus when you graduated up? I mean, are those kind of numbers you're gonna,
Yeah, I thought
Yeah,
they're gonna scale it.
all right,
Yeah,
very good.
Yeah, so I guess I was just when Lieutenant Governor brought that up about her 10 acres, I mean, I was just thinking about even, so if the minimum, if you had to have 117 acres of grazing land to meet the minimum, I mean, gosh, there's a lot of pretty big farms like under that acreage that it seems like would be legitimate agriculture to me if they were grazing it, but you wouldn't meet the minimum gross income very easily because of with the AUM system. So I mean, like a 60 acres of grazing land seems to me like that should be qualify as ag, but it wouldn't work to say you had to have a $1,500 or $4,000 minimum or whatever we came up with, because it wouldn't meet the AUM requirement. Did that make sense?
Yeah, so I mean, I felt generally in favor of that concept, AUM rule for grazing. Income,
Seems to make the most sense because grazing is
Yeah.
different than.
it is different,
And it's way different, especially crops.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think we got a rational basis for treating them differently because they are. Are you guys, that making sense to you guys?
Well, the mixed use, I think. Just take the $1,500 divided by 25, so that's
$60.
$60 in AUM. If your property can, for grazing is 15 AUMs, you just take, okay, here's the $3,000, $5,000, subtract out 60 times 15, and that's the income you have to meet from whatever other crop you're growing.
Right. And that's what I was saying earlier, separating them and moving the AUMs like the 1,500
Right.
based on the 1,500 and then everything else based on the 4 or 5 or 3, whatever you guys decide.
But I think what Brian is saying, we shouldn't have the 1,500 minimum for grazing because that takes out the 80-acre guy.
Not if they're irrigating though.
Correct, but most grazing in Montana is not irrigated.
Yeah.
It's, so, I mean, that's the question, do we keep the $1,500 for grazing? You're gonna cut out the 80 acres. Or do we just do strictly an AUM for grazing?
You have to have a pretty low AUM.
Well, that's- Bonnie raises the point that it's not, they have been cut out. It's not
Yeah.
anybody new. Yeah,
Oh, I know that.
And there
Yeah.
personally
I
aren't
know
any.
yeah.
There's probably, but that encourages them to put them in a crop product or production maybe, I don't know.
I mean, it goes back to, from the administration standpoint, it's the only real fail safe we have to not have to have some involved process for you to show that you're grazing and us to verify, other than you just attesting that, yep, I graze cows out here. We can't drive around and make sure you're actually grazing cows out
Yeah.
there.
No, I get it, I get it.
And right now, it's the 1,500 is the threshold. So if you have 10,000 acres. you
Not
don't
a
have
problem.
15.
Right.
Right, but if you go to AUM, now all of a sudden you have to make a pretty significant amount of money to qualify your 10,000 acre ranch versus a 2,000 acre ranch. Is that accurate?
Still 1,500,
Cause you've already made it.
because of
Yeah.
the land mass.
I guess what I'm saying is, we're not really solving the problem of somebody buying a 10,000 acre ranch, not using it as production. And you have to make the threshold high enough that they have to
Well, that's where
be a
the
true agriculture.
$6
That's
per
the X
acre.
dollars per
Yeah.
acre is supposed to solve that.
Have a minimum plus the.
Yeah.
But how many truly isolated 80-acre parcels are actually used for grazing?
Well, that's the interesting question. What Mr. Smith's example was, he wasn't even an isolated parcel.
No, he was
just
adjacent.
separate
Can I-
ownership and he was part of it.
A lot of them, but that they at least can get non-qual.
Right.
Well, no, they can't.
Right now.
Yeah, they do, they
Yeah.
do. You just can't lease for non-qual. And I,
Yeah.
But that
You-
gets back to those kind of people are using the system. You know, you buy 80 acres of dry land hills. You didn't buy it to raise cattle on, you bought it, you didn't want a place to live, but, you know, to put the
Not
cattle
involved.
on it, you can get your tax rate down.
Exactly.
But if you had if you bought 20 acres of irrigated ground, put your house on that, and they're trying to raise it, can't, you know,
So I-
you're both doing the same thing, but one.
And here's what I think Mark is saying about the grazing on the 10,000 acres. He's saying if we're saying grazing is $1,500 and we don't move off of that depending upon the size, the 10,000 acre guy only has to make $1,500 if that's all he's doing is grazing
Regardless
it.
of size.
And so in the scaling, we need to take that into account, that a certain size of acres, even for grazing, needs $1,500, which would equate to animal unit months. But then as those parcels get bigger, the AUM requirement should also
Should
get
also
bigger.
increase.
So
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
that 10,000 acre guy is got enough cows on there to be legitimate.
That makes sense. And that would capture the APRs.
Yeah.
For sure, if you did raise the AUM requirements according to size. That's a good.
So the question though is I thought if we were hitting 640 or above, it was $6 an acre.
$6 an acre, that's my
Right,
thoughts.
yeah.
So,
Right.
so we've already taken care of those.
Bigger
This is
one,
really back down to
the smaller parcel.
the little, the little house
On the
lots that people are claiming ag on, so they don't have to pay as much for their house lot. And, that gets the question about the Yellowstone Club about why is this guy paying, was it $74 and the other guy is
Millions.
millions or something? I mean, and I'm not sure. You said it, Bob, guy buys 20 acres or 80 acres of, grassy, rocky, whatever ridge tops. He's got, he's did it so he's got a view with his house, not because he's gonna run cattle. He just says, oh, hey, if I throw a few on here or claim something, I don't have to pay, market value on this land. And I think that guy should pay market value just like the one that's not doing that. And so I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel like we're back to the point of the minimum needs to be a little higher, like you're really engaged in it or you're not. And, I mean, you're engaged in it, that you're actually raising a crop that you're selling. I mean, hay is a pretty easy way to say, yeah, I'm engaged in ag production on it, but grazing, you get down to a 10 acre parcel, you're not grazing it, you're mowing it.
Right.
Just might be using a cow.
Right. And I'm just trying to be careful. I'm cognizant of these guys like Mr. Smith, right? He's smart. He's cowboy, even though it's not a big acreage. And there's gotta be a bunch of them.
Well, and
There's gonna be a few of them, and I'm just wondering how that, that's the internal part of, you file for, come look at it. This is what I'm doing. Does it fit into an actual ag operation and is it bona fide in what I'm doing? All right, that's a decision that needs to be made, but it's a one-off deal.
Right.
I don't know how you write an overarching rule that says, you're either kind of making it so lax that everybody gets it, or you're putting some standards on it saying you have to come in and say, this is really a different case than 90% of the people asking for it.
Right, so we would like to encourage the 80 acre people, but the truth of it is that's so easy to game if you don't put some standards on it. That it's just, we know it's gonna be abused, so we.
I think the way you deal with this situation is a different deal. If I have 80 acres in separate ownership, I should be able to lease that to someone with a bona fide operation, and that makes it bona fide ag. But that's not the way the law works.
Right. And maybe that's the simple now. That would be the simple one.
He could cut some hay off there and put the cows on the neighboring property and get his hay production off of that, and then grazing aftermath.
But if it's dry land. and you
Yeah,
don't
not
have-
all hay, you gotta have,
You can't raise much hay.
no,
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, I mean, we can go.
yeah,
we
this
got
is
about- we got
another
about an hour
complicated.
to fix two more things here, and I think some of this is stuff that you guys gotta work out among yourselves and then tell us what works and what don't. So that's trying to figure that all out while we're sitting here.
Before we leave this, Bill, can I ask one question about the definitions on page 1? So, on the definition of agriculture, we've got F, conservation. Land primarily used for protecting, and preserving nature, et cetera. Does that describe CRP?
So CRP, no. So the way CRP currently works is it wasn't fallow of some sort. That's how it stays classified until the CRP program runs out and they decide to use it, either retail it up or change it to grazing or whatever the case may be.
Okay.
But it stays classified as fallow the whole time it's in that program.
Is that by rule, I forget, or by statute?
By statute.
By statute.
Oh, maybe not.
Yeah,
I think it.
I'll
think it's
check,
in the
I'll
law.
check, but what they're saying is correct.
Yeah.
There's a protection for CRP.
That's involved.
And CSP too, both program?
CSP is not listed specifically, but the rule says, lists government programs such as CRP.
So it fall under this.
So it would fall under that.
Equip the same way? Equip the same way?
Yeah.
All right, are we ready for the fun one? I've been waiting all day for this one.
Which one was that? The 1 acre?
1 acre farm site.
Okay.
This is gonna be the easy one, right?
I hope so. So last time we talked about making all 1 acre farm sites market value, and there was kind of some mixed emotions in the group about doing that and what the consequences were gonna be. So Brian had reached out with the idea of trying to calculate a percentage of that market value. And so we started to explore that a little bit more to find out what we thought could work the best. And so our thought process is everything goes to market value. And then we look at the average market value of all of those 1 acre farm sites statewide and determine what the average value is. And then we can exempt off that amount of this 1 acre farm site. So as an example, Bryce has got him up here. We show how many farm sites we have in each county, what the average market value for each county is, and then we can even apply a factor to that. So Silverbow, the average was 50, the median home site value is 39,000. Well, that's not gonna hit very many of the counties, because a lot of them are higher. That 1 acre is much higher than that 39,000. And so you could add a factor to it. So you could say 150 times the average. It's gotta be something dynamic though, so that it can change cycle after cycle automatically without just being stuck in statute that the first 80,000 is exempt from taxation. We want it to be associated with a factoring that we could adjust at each reappraisal cycle. And so as an example, even if we use just the median at 39,000, the Silverbow home sites, if their average is 56,000, they would be paying taxes on the difference because the first 39,000 would be exempt. And so this would keep the people that are trying to apply for ag just to lower their market value of their properties. It would keep them from even bothering to do it because it wouldn't be worth their time. If you're looking at Flathead Lake folks, if they get 39,000 exemption, who cares? I'm not gonna plant any cherry trees because it isn't gonna do me any good. But on the flip side, Eastern Montana folks, while it's going to market value, they're still gonna be able to exempt off most of that market value and not be impacted by the notion that the home site is going on at market value.
So the exemption is on the market or on the taxable value?
So it's on it'll be exempted off the market value.
Exempted off the market value. So is that 39,000, that's across the state on a 1 acre home site on a farmstead or a ranch?
39,000 is the median, the average is 58,000. And so then we could put that exemption if we wanted to be a multiplier so that it can be dynamic and change your reappraisal cycle. You know, because if you feel that even 58,000 isn't high enough. And so furthermore, in the spreadsheet, it's showing if we change the home site values, what the benefit to the residential folks is going to be. Because the farm site folks will be paying more.
Yeah, I would say, so if you set so if you set the exempted amount at the median, that means 50% of property home sites will pay no taxes anymore, and 50% will pay some amount, because we've chosen the 50% line as saying that's the exempted point. If you set some multiple of that, you would be, again, if the point is to try to disincentivize the very high value properties from applying for ag, what this does is it market values those home sites. So the people who have the most to gain from getting ag status have to pay still the majority of their property value in taxes. But the people that don't have much to gain will get to fully exempt their home site. Right now, the taxes on a home site are like $20. So if you fully exempt all these home sites in eastern Montana, it's really not that much money that is getting shifted onto other taxpayers. So that's sort of a reason to allow this sort of exemption idea. And then in the west, and around like Flathead Lake and stuff, it's gonna increase the taxes on these home sites. So that's, I guess, the targeting mechanism that works with this exemption idea.
Did you send us that spreadsheet? Or no?
No.
No. So my question is, the median home site value, that's for the whole state of Montana,
Correct.
and the average home site value is for the whole state of Montana.
Yep.
So, how does what they're proposing in the homestead property tax working group impact this idea?
What?
Well, they'd still be valued, right?
Right.
So even if the value is exempt from taxation, these values would still be calculated and would apply for these rules
Yes.
versus
so they're-
the homesteading.
Plus this is just their land portion of it. And
Under the
so,
house.
under
Oh,
the
okay.
homestead, they would still get the reduced tax rate for the taxable portion,
the
any
house.
taxable portion of their land that's above the median and their improvements.
And then, okay,
Yeah.
okay, so they work together,
They would work together.
nice.
How hard is this gonna be to administer?
I don't think it'll be hard. We should be able to, we have class codes in place already. That we can use for this type of situation. It'll just be systematically trying to get, well, and we have already too, we have, if it's over 1.5 million, there's some adjustments. I think we can do it systematically, so we wouldn't have to have individual attention to each property. We should be able to figure out a system way to be able to do this calculation.
I have a question, relative to the property tax function, does this, average home site and median home site value take into account those home sites that are in farm corporations or LLCs?
Yes, anything, because for A classification, that all of that's, we don't care
Okay,
as far as how the ownership goes. If there's a home site there, it gets separated out and valued as a home site.
gotcha.
And it applies to each home site, so branches may have 3 or 4 of them.
That's true.
Okay.
Yep.
Very good, all right.
Is it gonna, are there any concerns about, as I understand it, this is a moving target, I mean, it's formulaic,
That's what we'd like it to be.
yeah. Predictability, I mean, any shifts generally are gonna be incremental, not big, huge surprises like we just had.
Oh, we can, yeah, make you surprised,
So-
right? By virtue of
Depends on the
the
market.
market.
And-
Would,
Market increase of 50%, given.
Yeah, which is an anomaly, but it could happen again.
It's not gonna happen there.
True, in most, it'll happen on Flathead.
So if you totaled up the value of all those home sites, it's what, 1% of the whole taxable value of class 4 property? Yeah, not much.
Relative.
but I think this alleviates the concern that we had last time about the legitimate farmers already getting just the $2,000 value and now being taxed at a market value. That panic goes away because most likely we're gonna be exempting off the majority of their value. And it also addresses Brian's issue with lakefront stuff, but the only reason they're applying or planting trees is to get that reduction. And it creates a little bit more equality from property owner next to each other that are paying a little more equally towards their property taxes.
So did you run this against your, eliminate non-qual land because, that was gonna kick people's taxes up $3,000 a year in the Gallup. So if you did this, I guess it wouldn't affect them if you no longer have non-qual.
Right,
But if they did qualify for ag, then they'd still get.
they're still gonna get
Yes.
a higher home site value.
Yeah, I mean, this. Working under the idea that there's an inequity that moving these to market value fixes, this is just taking a level of inequity that's acceptable. Because you're still gonna have inequity on anything that's getting this exemption that their neighbors also valued at $39,000 and still paying taxes. So there's still that inequity.
We're just closing the
The
gap.
flathead, yeah.
not
it's just the
eliminating it.
Flathead and the
Right.
Gallicans.
We're
that
reducing the,
You're narrowing that inequity.
I think it's a very innovative approach. If it's really, it can be administered, yeah, speaking from an administrator's concern, in a way that's doable.
Well, and especially if we pick. I want it to be dynamic so that we can recalculate it every appraisal cycle, but then it's gonna be a number. It's gonna be 39,000 or 58,000 or whatever that number is that can be applied across the board. I mean, we could get really creative and create zones of the states so that maybe eastern Montana's median is this, but western Montana's median is that. I mean, we could get creative like we do with forest land, but we don't wanna go there. Sorry, I mentioned it.
No. Yeah.
That'd be more accurate, but it'd still be bad, right? I mean, you throw eastern Montana in there, and Richland County and Petroleum County look a lot different.
Right.
Or,
Well, I mean, even if you look at what's the median value of a home in Roosevelt County?
Roosevelt, well, this is not the houses, this is just the land, the 1 acre land.
Right.
And Roosevelt,
$7,900.
Yeah, so if you exempt 39,000 of that, you're probably gonna be okay.
well, you're only gonna exempt up to 39,000.
The lower.
They're not gonna give you
the
the money
lesser.
back.
so the guy in Roosevelt's paying zero.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
he's paying 0 on the home site.
Under the house.
I mean, right now he's paying.
Right.
13, they still get the class 4 rate.
I don't think so.
No, it's A grade.
So is it an aggregate? Well, so 20.
So the guy in Roosevelt County saw a $20 tax reduction.
Right,
So who picks up that burden?
Everybody
We
else.
talked about
Everyone else.
in Roosevelt County, everybody else, would-
all the other, like homeowners.
yeah,
And so it surely isn't gonna be a $20 reduction, because if the mills float up slightly, you're gonna be paying more on all your qualified ag, but it's, I mean, so it's not a true, probably $20 reduction.
Well, so, yeah, and the
It might end up being
the last column is the effect on the median house. So in Roosevelt County, you can see no home sites. The third column is the number of home sites that would see a tax increase. So in Roosevelt County, there's no home sites that would pay any taxes after this. And what is that average effect on the homeowner? 31 cents.
33.
33 cents. The impact on the
So the shift is 33 cents a
I
year.
think that's maybe the drive home point is home sites pay almost no taxes right now.
Gallatin and Flathead and Bear Valley.
So if you exempt them, it's not moving the needle much. If you market value them, it, you know, it moves the needle in like the Gallatin and stuff.
The number of households is.
$15 a house, $20 a house.
The number of households that will see an increase. A lot.
Just walk through the table. Explain every call. Yeah.
And
Is this gonna work for us if most of the legislators come from those highly populated areas?
Here,
Well,
can you share the screen?
Oh.
I think the difference, even those highly populated Gallatin County areas, is if this neighbor isn't egg classified and this neighbor is, at least on that one first acre, they're paying
same.
similar
This- yeah.
taxes.
There's a, you're right, yeah. You need borrow my glasses.
Yeah, so I was just looking,
So anyway, Bryce, could you just explain what every column does?
Sure. So column C is just the number of current home sites. P is the average value of those home sites for that county.
Is that the value of the land?
Just the
the
land,
land.
just that one
if
acre.
it were.
That 1 acre of land.
If it were at market value, yes.
Column E is the number of those, so in Cascade, the 979 home sites, 876 of them would see an increase because that exemption amount is currently 39,000, whereas that average home site is 59,000, so they'd still see some tax increase, just not as big as the other would have. The mill shifts, the current taxes, those home sites pay, what they'd go up.
Difference,
The difference.
difference between that and then the average. The average, I think I set up to take only the ones that see a tax increase are being considered in that average. No, that's not true. That's not true. It must be the total change divided by the total home sites, so.
so can you, list highest to lowest, the average home site tax increase?
Now, keep in mind, this is using the median of 39,000. We can switch that to average and go to the
Right.
59,000
be
or whatever,
dynamic.
however you guys want to create that. If we want an average home site for the state or median home site for the state, whatever you choose.
Median feel better.
Well, the thing about the median is you're saying 50% pay no taxes and 50% do pay taxes. Is that,
But the median also is very heavily weighted towards eastern Montana, where the majority of these qualified egg home sites sit, which brings that down.
Whereas if you used average, things would get a lot wilder, right? Because
Bigger
median
ships.
is leaving out those outliers.
Correct.
You're gonna catch more properties with more than 51% pay, or 50% pay no taxes.
Right.
50%.
Right.
That's right.
Right, that's why median feels better, right? More fair.
Depending on what side of that average.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
right.
That's what- that's which, yeah, whose ox I'm riding today.
That,
Number of households?
now, if you would expand it, I'll tell you the column, but I can't see it right now. The average total home site, no, average home site increase. Column M. I was wondering what counties are gonna be most affected, what's the high?
The second one, oh no, I was second one, I think that.
Yes, largest to smallest. Sorry, I didn't know that. This would be so hard, I would call it.
So,
How come it didn't sort it that way, though?
Yeah, it didn't. And so Silver Bowl is 9,900.
No, it's probably messing with it when you sort it because it's
Okay,
got
yeah,
the lookups.
sorry, I threw it all off.
You paste it as values, price.
Mr. Campbell has a question.
So, thanks. So only the people that their land's in agriculture status and their home site value is market value of their home site is above this arbitrary exemption amount that we come up with. Oh, they should be the only ones that would have a tax increase. Is that correct?
That's right.
So okay, now I can see the chart again. Cause I just saw that Missoula County. Oh, okay, now it's making more sense. Sorry. So there's currently 430 home sites that are on ag land in Missoula County. And most all of those 395 would have their property value be higher than the exemption amount, and they'd have an increase in taxes.
That's right.
Okay, and the exemption amount on this graph is set at 39.
Yes.
Okay.
50, I think.
Oh.
So I mean, in the situation with the cherry farmers, for what it's worth, gosh, I mean, you can make that exemption like 200,000 and, that would make a big difference. I mean,
So
so,
in Flathead, the average tax increase would be $580. And Lake would be 507.
in Flathead, yeah.
Flathead, 500, yeah. And Gallatin, is that the highest affected one? Gallatin goes up over 1,000.
Wow. Again, the average is like that
It's the.
big
average.
sky
It's
lot
the
that's
average.
going from $74 to 7 million potentially or whatever. I mean, that's it's gonna drag that average up quite a bit.
Yeah. Interesting.
What do you think?
I like the concept. I think it's
What do you
innovative.
think, John?
That's-
I'll get to start over.
Don't do overs.
So go to, what are you, Golden Valley, John?
Yeah, Golden Valley.
So right.
That's on the bottom of the list.
53.
What number are you? What number are you?
53.
53. Oh my. So.
Zero.
Yep, so in Golden Valley County, all of your home sites would be fully exempted because the average value of your home sites there is 9,797. And the median that we're exempting off is 39,000, so there'd be nobody in Garfield and Weebo and Golden Valley and even Petroleum that would be paying any taxes on their home site because it would be fully exempted off.
So we'll pick it up somewhere else.
Oh, yeah, it'll get distributed
But
to
you
your
gotta-
grazing.
Yeah,
land.
so
Yeah.
the mills would go up by 0.39 to
Well,
make up
that's
for
not
that.
significant.
Right, but that's
Right.
assuming, those mills will go up 0.39 assuming that in your county or Fergus County or wherever, that we don't have a significant tax increase on some of these properties that we're talking about. And that will offset some of that in some of the counties, right?
In some of these counties though, they're also not gonna have a whole lot of non-qualified ag land either. The majority of these smaller counties are gonna be qualified ag already.
True,
So
okay,
these little ones aren't gonna be the ones that are gonna see a significant bump in value because we're stripping the non-qual.
gotcha, but could be some in the recreational ranches.
Yes.
Your neighbor, for example,
Yes.
is gonna make up a piece of that difference that you got off your house.
Which neighbor?
The one that you told me was planting Quakies in the former.
Oh, yeah, well, that's Fergus County.
Oh, okay.
See, I mean, there's a few places in our county that are going out of production, but not much. Mostly, it's like petroleum county. You'll see more and more of it, but it hasn't hit yet. We're not sought after.
Yet.
You're not discovered.
Yeah, we're not discovered.
Well, I like the concept. Does anyone not like the concept?
I have one last question. So, in John's case in Golden Valley, why would the total tax income for the county change at all under this plan? Because the tax value for a homestead there on a farm should remain the same. If it's not going to market value because it's exempt. But why would the taxes change at all for that person?
Because technically in Golden Valley County, the 172 home sites are getting a $20 tax reduction because they're gonna be fully exempt, where today they're paying $20 for that
Okay.
house.
Okay, so I thought they're just fully exempt from having to pay the market value, but they still had to pay whatever they were paying before under the ag status.
Ryan, they're just gonna tax his outhouse $20 to make up for it.
So in Golden Valley, as an example, the average is 9,797 of those 1 acre farm sites. And so all of that dollar going forward would be exempted out. Today, it's not exempt at $2,003. So the county overall is gonna see if this were the only change that was ever made to value, the county would see a decrease in taxable value, and that would create that mill shift and that other folks, the residential side, picking up 42 cents more in their taxes because the qualified ag folks are gonna be exempted.
Okay, is that an issue or is that a problem? Does that make it too complicated?
Not there, I don't think, because the mill's gonna go up how much? 3/10 of a mill?
Yeah.
That's gonna apply to everybody, the railroad and
I see.
the ag land and the power company and stuff, the portion that other homeowners pick up is in Golden Valley County, the small portion of that.
Absolutely.
Okay,
So he'll save it on his house and he'll pick it up on his ranch land, he'll probably pay for most of what he saved back.
okay, so one last question. So let's say it is set at 39,000 and a farmer's homestead market value is 40,000. They would be exempt for all but that $1,000 would they pay market value on, or market rate on $1,000.
That's right. They'd still pay taxes on 1,000 of their $40,000.
Okay.
Which would still be less. Yeah, now.
Yes.
Be at 1,000 at 1.35% instead of 2,000 at 2.16%.
Okay.
So to put a fork in this thing, is everybody okay with this?
What do you wanna use as the number? Do you want the statewide median?
Is that
Do you want
39?
statewide average? Do you want?
What's a revenue number statewide, revenue neutral number statewide?
It's probably pretty high. Because again, these farm sites are not paying much in taxes now. And so at the top end, you're looking at thousands of dollars increase revenue. So,
And that's dependent on by county.
Well, no, it's dependent on statewide taxable values.
Well, yeah.
Oh, all they worry about is what the 95 mils bring.
Yeah.
Have to bring up 95.
These properties are all
They can't
on
exist.
ag land that's currently qualified.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, I actually don't have a preference on the 50,000 or the 39. I don't know that it makes,
What's the fairest for you statisticians? Is it the median?
well, do you want? So the median, what the median does is it says half of home sites will pay taxes. Does that sound fair? Or do you want to put it on the average so it's skewed a little higher, so maybe 20% of home sites pay taxes? I'd say the benefit of the average is that it's, well, I don't know, I guess my gut reaction is that the average is more generous and therefore it's maybe more likely to get passed. It causes fewer people to have a tax.
Well, and when we were playing around with this too, I mean. Eastern Montana, clearly from these numbers and these average home sites for those counties, they're gonna be zero no matter what it is. So truly, we're talking about now Western Montana and how much of a discount do we wanna be giving those legitimate qualified egg folks off their market value for their farm site?
When you go to the average price, how many are left above zero?
Did it move the needle price?
Calculating.
There it goes.
Wow. A lot more zeros.
There's more zeros.
And the tax increase for those, fast growing counties is more.
So 29,711 home sites at the average 6,255 of them was more.
And they're pretty much in about, what, 6 counties?
Yeah. Maybe it's more than 6.
Oh, you mean, who is pretty much, who are you talking about? Those that are at zero or those that are the highest?
Those that are, they go up.
Okay, those that go up.
Those significant numbers of them left, so they're like, Galvin County's 1,000 left, and 600 in Flathead County, and of those 3, and then the 1,400 in
Rural
Ravalli.
Valley.
That's a lot.
But those are all.
But also their amount of tax impact is also lessened because they get more acted on.
Okay.
But they're pretty high value houses now. Or pretty high value lots.
Yeah.
They probably got a pretty high value house on it.
Right. That's true too.
Some of them in probably Lake County or the $50,000 cabin on the $2 million lot.
That's right.
Well, if the homestead bill were to pass, a lot of these would be seeing that reduced effect too, because it would be probably more likely the communities that have the second homes and the vacation properties that.
But the homestead act would not apply to the second homes and vacation properties.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, and that's where probably
That's where.
the higher
increase
concentration
would come,
would be in these same counties that have the
those second. homes.
higher.
So they would see an
Because
increase in tax as a result of higher valuations and an increase in tax because of the higher rate. It's not subject to.
All these are assumed to be owner occupied here.
Right.
Well, these are both.
Well, that doesn't come into effect in the
Yeah.
current law. So
Right. So they're owner occupied and absentee on this list.
Yeah.
Right?
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
we don't know.
Their homes,
They're just home sites.
doesn't matter who lives there.
That's right.
or if anyone lives there.
And so it's highly likely that not all of these are going to get the home.
Right.
Because on a lot of these, it could also be on the same ranch, multiple home sites on the same ranch as well.
So you only get one there.
For your homestead. yeah.
Right.
Well, if it's long-term rentals, though.
Well, yeah. we can do
Questionable
that too.
whether
Yeah,
it goes under 3 home sites or
or long-term rentals or.
long-term
Yeah.
rentals, that would also be a lower rate.
So to kind of move it along, Dylan raises a good point. The average is probably more politically saleable because it affects fewer people negatively.
I'm fine with the average.
Kind of feels it's nuts, right? Other than that was, are you guys all good with that or is?
Mhm.
Well, let's go with that.
Yeah.
Progress. So I think we're somewhere close to being to public comment unless we've got more we want to talk about here before we do our job and then schedule a Zoom meeting. Don't you guys think a Zoom meeting would be appropriate here in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah.
So can I just recap a couple of
Yes,
things?
please.
We want to do the income scaling spreadsheet of sorts to kind of show what that might potentially look like in conjunction with a dollar amount start. At some point in time, we'll also be doing a per acre incremental adjustment as well. So we'll take a look at those types of things. We also will rewrite. We need to create a bill. Earlier today, we talked about something that we haven't created yet.
So we'll have to amend the RTC one to put that acreage
Yep.
limit for the exclusion of reporting the sales price on farm timber sales. Then we need to get together bill draft that sets the minimum acres at 640 using the grazing rate at 20 times multiplier.
Yep. But at the very beginning, we talked about something that we hadn't drafted a bill for.
That's the idle land classification.
No, where do we start? Where do we start, note taker?
That's his opening comments and then we went on with that stuff.
The Tonys.
That's part of what we're shipping out here.
The laddering.
Do we want to? We might as well move those definitions now over to 15.7.202 as well, shouldn't we?
Yeah, we'll move those in the next draft we send out to everyone. We'll put those where we think they belong.
And we'll have to draft this non-A bill that creates that
Idle land.
idle
Yeah.
land. We'll have to draft that as brand new because we've decided we don't want to amend the current non-qual. We're gonna dispose of that and create a new bill
With the idle
with
land.
the idle land.
Yeah.
And are we gonna do that outside of this? Eliminate automatic classification? Do you want it as a separate bill or do you want it just mixed in with this? Eliminate the automatic
I
classification.
think we gotta mix it in because this thing doesn't fly in pieces. It
No.
flies as one plane or it
Okay.
Well, yeah.
entirely, right? And
Right.
there's no severability in this thing that would work.
Right.
Great.
I think the only severability there isn't in this draft now is the eliminate non-qual. We would have to put the eliminate non-qual in there, but then still have eliminate non-qual as just its own standalone bill in case this one goes down. Still taking a shot at the
Alternatives.
eliminate non-qual. That's
Yeah, I'm okay with that approach.
What I'm thinking of that we haven't talked about is the reapplication process or re-proving up or periodic review.
Right, yeah.
We haven't gone.
after this bill passes, there has to be a point in time where everybody has to step up
Yeah.
and re-qualify what they're doing.
So-
One-time thing, but then after that, yeah.
So dare I recommend that we do these bills, provided these all pass, perhaps bring forward a reapplication bill in 2027? Or do you wanna do it
No, I
now?
think they have to be integrated. With the proposal we did that never got anywhere from 20 to 40, we phased it in. We thought about, cause you didn't have the manpower for everybody to reapply all at once.
Right.
Try to stick that phase into this.
Well, and I think that's reality still today. If we're
Yeah.
making everybody apply, that's gonna have to be in a phase as well, because we're not gonna be able to do them all.
Without, one-time employees or. yeah.
Right.
So do you start with, I mean, I would assume we talked about it, anytime land's transferred, that's an automatic.
That's an automatic,
It's
an
yeah.
automatic.
And it already is an
But
automatic.
all existing ones, we phased it in and then the effective date didn't happen until everyone had applied.
Yeah.
And then it became effective for everybody, but we at least started the chain.
So do you do it regionally, like?
There was a
Our
process.
our original was by size, so
Oh,
those parcels that were, I think, 40 acres and below would apply first, and then 40 to 80, and then 80 to 160, I think is kind of how we had it staggered out. And we staggered it out based on the number of properties that fit into those categories, so that we kind of had an even disbursement of how many we'd be processing every year, so that it could be manageable.
And so I would just request the department, you know best how to phase it in, administratively, what we can do for our proposal, as long as the group is conceptually okay with that phase-in concept. But we don't wanna go to the legislature and ask to hire a bunch of employees to implement this, cause that will make it more difficult to pass.
Sorry, I just wondered how long you thought it might take to get everybody through the process.
It was 3 years with our last bill, so this one would be 3 to 4 years.
And then we wouldn't see any change,
We had
Until then,
constitutional
until
concerns,
everybody-
that's where you are taxing the same class
I think there's some,
differently, so we made it effective at the end of the phase in for
Yeah.
everybody.
there is some benefit if you did put it, say, 2029 for your appraisal. Cause then it would give time to notify people that this change is coming, and if you're not qualified ag yet, you have 4 years to make that decision and get yourself producing to know what those income thresholds are gonna be.
Producing or leasing to someone.
Instead of springing it, you have that
Right, no, I think,
period.
yeah, the effective date can be 2029, but we gotta start getting the
Oh, yeah,
applications
yeah.
before then, and
Absolutely.
we have to prescribe how that happens, or everyone will wait until 2029.
Right.
So some people have less time to alter their plans than others.
And some people might panic and apply right away, even though it's not their turn yet, and that's okay, we're gonna take those applications too.
So I think we'd leave it to you guys to fashion a proposal.
Okay.
for-
And then what kind of a frequency would you like people to, and what kind of formality would you like that to be?
What works with your nonprofits? How often are your nonprofits?
So we're doing that every 8 years. The exemption thing is what we're proposing for the 2025 legislature. Rick is proposing to do reapplying every 8 years, and we're
And then
gonna
you
create a
stagger it.
simplified form that doesn't have all the details and attaching all of the documentation. It's gonna be a more simplified form. And I think we could do the same thing with this egg stuff.
Think you would, and then I think, so are all your renewals due in the same 8th year, or do you stagger them so that 20%?
Right, we're staggering them based on
We
type.
want to do the same thing where
So some of them are either gonna have less than 8 years for the first, if you stagger them, or longer than 8 years, depending on,
Right.
yeah, so I think we give you the discretion to figure out what staggering and documentation.
And can we do it online?
Yeah,
That is
Yeah, we'll
two
build
things,
that in
the
first.
egg application that all of these folks to these bills will have to apply for, we're getting that so that it's an online application process. And then this reapply would also be a shorter form that would be available online as well.
So it's not hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah, online or paper, you could do it either way, but we'll be
Right.
sure to provide an online option.
Yeah.
All right. Do public comment. Is there public comment? You guys do? Not right now, so there's no, is there any public comment online?
I'm not seeing any hands, no.
Okay, so let's talk about a Zoom meeting. John on his way out said next week is awful for him. When is Rick? Is it the week of 24th?
24th and 25th, yeah.
So that's when you don't wanna do it?
Well, I'm gonna have to be there with something to show him. Maybe you should go.
Do we actually have to have a draft or just the concepts?
We talked about a
Oh,
draft.
Megan's online, let's ask her.
Hey, Megan, what do you think? Megan's gonna have to wake Megan up. Hi, Megan.
Hello.
Wake up.
Well, I think you could have drafts or you could have recommendations. It's kind of up to the committee about how attached you are to the language, I think. That's kind of my 2 cents. You might also ask the chair her opinion.
She's still there. Senator, are you still around?
Oh, it looks like she's gone.
Oh, no. Oh, sorry. She's still there.
I'm here.
There you are. Senator, what are your
Okay.
thoughts on this, taking this to revenue interim? Would you be okay with concepts or would you like bill drafts next, the end of this month?
Well, I think with being able to work with our stellar staff on the Revenue Interim Committee, as much as we can get put together in bill drafts would be most desirable. Concept is going to leave us open for more discussions and maybe getting off the trail of the most prominent priorities here. So that's why I would suggest having bill drafts by then, but it would definitely be up to the committee if you want to take your chances and let the Revenue Interim Committee take hold of your concepts. So either way, we've got the driver's seat here right now.
Thank you, Senator. Well, I think we've got the horsepower of revenue to get bill drafts.
Thank you.
Megan would like to be
Our
involved.
bill drafts are pretty rough.
Right.
compared to what the actual,
Yeah.
bill- ours are just capturing the concepts and not the actual
Right.
drafting process and reconciling with all the other stuff that they do for the actual drafting process. So I guess, Megan, how much time, if we got you something, how much time do you need to make it pretty and an actual bill draft?
So we have legislative days on the 18th and 19th, which will take up most of my days. And I'm also staffing another committee on the 17th. So having something later next week would be ideal. And then also if we're presenting it in committee, we'd like to give the members probably time to look at it in advance as well.
I forget what the meeting dates were, Megan, or it's
24th and 25th.
24th and 25th.
The meeting is only on the 24th. We're not meeting on the 25th. And then I'm tied up the 17th through the 19th with other committees and legislative days.
We're good on the 14th is when we're done with summer committee meetings. That's a Friday the 14th.
I was gonna suggest the 17th for a Zoom meeting. That way John can be on it with us.
Okay.
Megan and Senator, is it okay if we got you our version of a rough bill draft, clearly not in presentable form yet? And that would give you all the time, it would give the committee all the time they need to look at it.
Well,
And you all the time you need to actually make a real bill out of it when you need it to.
and we do have some of them. We can quickly revamp up the RTC one, and we have the eliminate non-call one already that we can send that we're making no changes to. The big one, and even this 1 acre probably could be spit out fairly quickly. But those ones you guys are gonna need to see first. The biggest one is gonna be the eliminate the automatic qualification. That's the one that will take the most time to spruce up.
And so is it okay if we had all those, the first ones she listed, basically in a final draft form to you, it'd be it. The last one, if we can't get it into to you in time to make a really good bill draft. At least we could get it to the committee as our draft. How's that? Would that be acceptable, Senator and Megan?
Okay, you're talking about having it to us the 17th?
Well, if everybody is okay meeting on the 17th, I'm just trying to include John unless everybody, John Roush, unless everybody else has a problem.
Only if it's
And
at 2 o'clock. Yeah.
Megan has a conflict on the 17th.
Okay, but that wouldn't be for the meeting with us.
Okay. Are you good with that, Megan? Thumbs up?
Yeah, so I couldn't attend the meeting on the 17th, but if I had a draft for the concepts around the 17th, I could work on it later that week.
Okay.
Not that way, it's gonna, we don't wanna put anybody in a pinch here, including my crew. So is everybody okay with the Zoom meeting on the 17th, and it has to be after 2?
I won't wake up from my procedure till then, so I need to be awake.
Gotcha.
So after 2 would be preferable.
And then
After
should
2 would be preferable.
3 o'clock on Monday,
Great,
17th?
yeah, awesome.
Anybody not like that? Does that mean everybody likes that? Going twice, it's
I
done.
won't be there. I get to have a root canal that day, so.
Oh, that sounds like even more fun
Right,
than this.
I'd rather be here. That's okay, you won't need me. My part will be done by then.
Super. We'll have a Zoom thing sent out to everybody. We'll have drafts out as quick as we can get them turned around to everybody. Thanks, everybody.
Public comment. Oh,
We already did.
there's none on the,
There's
okay.
nobody on it.
Well, I just want to thank everybody here for your contributions, the incredible work you've done. I think this is just really important. I'm excited about the results and just from the bottom of my heart, thank you all for all the time and effort you put into this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your confidence in our.
It's, I am, I'm excited.
Thanks, everybody.